You found the Sales Hunter podcast. My name's Mark Hunter, and today we're going to talk about networking, building your brand, and it begins with you. And the expert Collin Mitchell is in the house. You probably know him from Humantic AI and his award-winning podcast, Sales Transformation. So, hey, without further delay, let's get the show going.
You're listening to the Sales Hunter podcast with Mark Hunter, where the focus is to help you as a sales leader sell with confidence and integrity. And now here's your host.
Today, we're talking about how to build that network, and there's nobody better, because there's nobody that gets more out of 24 hours in a day than our guest, Collin Mitchell. Collin, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me. Glad to be here.
What time did you get up this morning?
So you caught me on not one of my best days. I woke up a little bit later today, about 4:30, but
about 4:30. There you go.
Yeah. So it was a late day today.
Because I'll tell you what, you really do know how to balance your work, your home. You got a house full of kids there, and so yeah. But anyway, hey, let's talk about business. Let's talk about sales. Let's talk about how do we create that brand that we can be really, really proud of ourselves. I mean, you've done it. You've done it yourself personally. You've done it professionally. You've helped people. Talk to us.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting topic because I built my first business without a brand, and it was much harder to do without a brand. So there is many reasons to do it with a brand, and that could be your business, that could be, in a sales role, whatever the case is. I'm a big fan of podcasting as a way to do this because, there's a couple different things you can think about for your brand, right? Your brand is what? Your reputation, how people think of you when, you're not around. And that could be, based on how you treat your prospects and your customers, right? You often talk about, Mark, treating your prospects like customers, right? That is part of your brand as a seller, right? But your brand is something that can work for you when you're not there, right? And so social is extremely powerful. If you're a seller these days, you've got to be even a somewhat savvy marketer. And one of the easiest ways to do that, because frankly, the barrier to entry is pretty low, is to start a podcast and have conversations with people and create content. And you want to know your customers, well, have some conversations with them in a medium like this, where it's not all about, your problems and how I can help you by selling you my product.
I love what you're talking about there, because I always use a line that your reputation arrives before you do. Nobody does business with anybody without first checking them out online. What are they doing online? And if they can't find you, guess what? They're not going to do business with you. And you talk about podcasts being so easy, but so is just being engaged on LinkedIn, just being engaged out there in social media. Can people take it too far, though?
Oh, yeah, definitely. But there's something you said there that struck a chord with me, though, is you said being engaged, right? Let's talk about that for a minute, because what does that mean, right? That doesn't mean sitting around stalking people online, pitch slapping them in their DMs, and being what we call a lurker, right? Engaged means you're consistently showing up and you're actively engaged. That means sharing your original thoughts in comments and threads, posting original content. It always baffles me when salespeople will say, well, I don't know what to post. What am I going to post? I don't have anything to say. You're in conversations with sales. You're in conversations as a salesperson with your prospects every single day. You have a lot to talk about. You know exactly what's going on inside their businesses. Now you can take that knowledge and turn that into content that benefits many people.
Wow, what you just said there was so much. I mean, there's a phrase that you don't post and ghost, where you post and then I have some friends who, I post every day on LinkedIn, but they never engage. And then they wonder why their comments, why their posts don't get anything. But let's come back to this thing where people say, I don't know what to post. I mean, give me a break. If you don't know what to post, what have you been doing with yourself lately?
Right.
I mean, because there's always something in there. And it's a way for you to engage not only current customers, but prospects. It's a way that you really build your network. But here's the question I got. can you do too much on LinkedIn? I mean, can you become drunk on social media?
Yeah.
Because
Yeah.
I see people, they will spend countless, especially a few years ago, when it really became hot. We saw people just spending all day, all night on social media. And they were not even coming anywhere close to making their quota
Yeah.
because they weren't out there selling. What,
Yep.
What's that
It's
fine line? What's
it's
that?
it's even worse than that, Mark. It's gotten pretty bad where I've talked to sales leaders, who made some bad hiring decisions based on, people's social brand or, what they claimed they're capable of doing. And that's happened, more times than I think a lot of sales leaders would like to admit, where they've hired people based on their social clout. And so that's the thing, right? And here's where it goes wrong. Are you actually contributing in a way that helps you in your role, right? Or like, are you posting sales content or tips and tricks and whatever, and you don't sell to salespeople? Like, how does that really serve you, in your professional role? Not at all, right? And that's when people get into this trap of chasing likes and comments. And unfortunately, salespeople, likes and comments don't pay commission.
Amen.
But your sales job does pay commission. So, and then and let's say there's people out there who say, well, hey, I have a job and then I have a side hustle. Many people have side hustles or side gigs or whatever. And if that's the case, then maybe you have a bit of a mixed strategy. But ultimately, what you do online and how you use LinkedIn and how you build your brand should be helping you do your job easier. When social's done right, it becomes an inbound channel for a sales professional.
I think it's an inbound channel, but it also reinforces your outbound channel.
Right.
Because, I'll post comments and I'll engage conversations, and I may learn an insight that I'll turn around and use in an outbound phone call. I'll turn around and share because, again, it's increasing my knowledge base. Because I always say this, you've got to play to your audience. I mean, I think you bring up a good point. What's the point of posting sales tips and tricks if you're not selling to salespeople? You're right. Deal with your audience. So what are some of the more simplistic things that you think salespeople get wrong when it comes to building your network? Not just in social media, but in general.
Yeah. I would say the thing that they get wrong is, one, there's still a lot of people that are doing this pitch slapping strategy, right? And I don't know if that's the equivalent of walking up to somebody and, pitching them right away, to buy your stuff, right? Or asking for time on their calendar, right? And you got to really change your mindset of how can I add value, right? And the easiest ways to add value is to literally ask them for nothing, right? Connect with the right people and put out valuable content that serves them, that teaches them, that challenges their thinking, that, gives them insights that they maybe couldn't get anywhere else. Because here's an interesting stat. The average buyer consumes 18 pieces of content, B2B buyers, before they purchase something. Now, do you want to be one or many of those pieces of content that they consume? Do you want to be part of that conversation that they're having digitally before they make a purchasing decision? Or do you want to be entirely left out of it? And that's the question you have to ask yourself as a salesperson, right? So connecting and pitching and pitch slapping is where a lot of folks go wrong. Also, another thing where people is they're just not consistent. They're not consistent. Posting once in a while is not enough. And if you're a bit uncomfortable and you're like, I don't know what to post, because that's what, a lot of people tend to think. First, just start with commenting, connect with the right people. I mean, a lot of times your buyers don't get a ton of engagement, right? They're not like LinkedIn influencers, right? So a thoughtful comment to somebody who's only used to getting maybe 2 to 3 comments on a post stands out in a big way. And like you said, Mark, complements your outbound efforts, right? Because then you can call and say, hey, I really enjoyed that post. Here's my thoughts. I'm not sure if you saw that.
Yeah, because that's a technique I love to do. Is there may be somebody who I want to engage with, and I share this with other salespeople also, you start commenting on their posts, not stalking them every day, but you're sharing intellectual insights and commenting. And then over a period of time, you can begin to say, hey, you can message them. Hey, we've been having a great conversation. Love to connect with you on a phone call. You take that online connection and you turn it into an offline conversation. To me, that's a home run.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I think the important thing that you said is don't stalk them, right? You don't want to be just going to every single time that they post, right? But where you can add some value, where you can add some additional insight, where you have some experience to share, it is all, great things. And, another thing that you can do, which is a strategy that works really well, is, if you're selling into, C-level, which a lot of people are, a lot of those folks are on podcasts, and you can actually search, find the podcast that they're on, typically learn some really interesting things about them, and have a really creative way to reach out to them and grab their attention.
Wow, what you did, you just acknowledged that you actually paid attention to them. You gave them some focus by listening to that respective interview, and then you commented. You're right. That's going to gain somebody's attention. So here's a question I want to throw out. I'm going to change gears just a little bit.
Sure.
Do you see social media as being a short game to get business or a long game to build business?
Oh, it's a long game. It's definitely.
Thank you. I like you even more. I like you even more now. Yeah.
I actually considered saying short game just to get you riled up for a second.
Yeah, because you knew I'd say long game, right?
But I thought, man, he might end the live if I say short game.
You're right. This broadcast is now ending.
Yeah, it's a long game, and that's the thing where I think a lot of salespeople go wrong, is to think that you can't think of it short-minded, right? You can't think of it as, and it takes time, right? So if you start posting tomorrow and do it for 30 days, it may result in zero pipeline for you. If you start using social as part of your strategy, and start focusing on building your brand and your reputation online, it's not going to pay off immediately. And so people are going to give up before they start to actually benefit from those, putting in that sort of effort. And so you have to, give it 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, to really start to pay off.
Now, you're a great person because you share a lot of really good insights, but you also share some personal stuff. I saw a picture posted the other day of your kids on a farm. And that was ridiculous. So what's the right balance?
Yeah, it's interesting. And I have a friend, Kevin Hopp, who he says, LinkedIn becomes Facebook on the weekends.
Well, wow. Now I've never heard that before. LinkedIn becomes Facebook on the weekends. That's very interesting. Okay.
And it sort of has become that, when people first started posting personal stuff on LinkedIn, there used to be people that got really bothered by it. They used to say, hey, this is a professional network. This is LinkedIn. This is not the place for this. And I don't even know, what your thoughts are. But look, business is personal. It has been for a long time. People buy from people. And so if you have the ability to share something that creates a connection or a bond or a familiarity or something with your prospects, do it. Now, is there a balance? Absolutely. You can't be posting that stuff all of the time. I guess you could, but it's not going to serve you well. But if, 10, 20%, even 20% is a little bit on the high end, but like 10, 15% of what you share, if it shows a little bit more of you as a person, as a seller, rather than just professional thoughts, I think that's a really good recipe and a nice balance for it to be very effective.
Now, I like what you said, 10, 15%, because I can buy into that. What I don't like is when people think LinkedIn is Facebook and everything they post is personal. I'm sorry. It is. Let's keep it business. Move that stuff over to Instagram. Move that stuff over someplace else. But you're right. Posting a few pictures. And I like that idea that LinkedIn becomes Facebook on the weekends. Or it becomes personal because, again, who uses Facebook? Yeah.
And now I typically try to tie it in, right? It's like when I posted that picture of my kids on the farm, it was like, hey, I try to tie it in a little bit of like, hey, been going hard, finished the quarter, needed to slow down now to go fast, right? Which I think salespeople understand. I sell into people, right? So even when I post that personal stuff, it's typically got a professional spin or tie-in on it, which if you can pull that off, I think it's even better. Now, here's one thing that I will take a hard stance on, and I've seen some of this going on, and I think I probably have a good idea of what your thoughts are. Please keep the food pictures. Please keep the food pictures off of LinkedIn. There is no rhyme or reason of why you should be posting food pictures on LinkedIn. Please.
Dang, I like you more and more every day, man. I agree. It's like, put those over on Instagram, put those someplace else. You're right. I could care less. But again, it comes back to, and I'm going to go back to that picture that you shared with your kids out on the farm, and you had shared that post, and you run absolutely hard, but you have this unbelievable balance because you get up early. Like you said, you want to spend time with the kids in the morning, and then you also want to be able to shut it down late in the afternoon, and you have those windows where you're all, and that picture kind of allowed us to see that, hey, Collin does do that. He does actually do what he says he does. So I think to a certain degree, social media confirms who we are if we do it right. And I think you do it right. Now, what are some of the, you've already talked on some of the big mistakes people make, but let's blow this picture up into the bigger scene in terms of networking in general. Because again, how do you build that brand? What do you see are the most critical elements today of somebody's personal brand? And I don't care whether you're a solo seller, whether you're part of a major Fortune 1000 company or an SMB player.
Yeah.
What are some of the critical things that we need to be aware of for our brand?
Yeah, it's a great question. And it actually, when you ask that question, it kind of tied into something that you said leading up to the question, right? Is the person online should match the person offline, right? So what does that mean? That means whatever I'm portraying to be socially, if I were to meet you on a Zoom, in person, at a networking event, in a business meeting, it should match. There shouldn't be like, hey, that's not the person that I thought, or, you shouldn't feel some sort of like gotcha sort of moment, which unfortunately happens because a lot of times what people portray online is not always accurate, right? There's a lot of these gurus popping up. And it's something that really irritates me. And I post about it often of, you really got to check who you're taking advice from, because, somebody hiring or building sales team advice who's never led a sales team, is ridiculous. And there's some people who argue, well, hey, everybody has an opinion. Yeah. Okay. Well, we know what they say about opinions, right? And the thing is I think that when you're sharing your thoughts about something, I actually had put a post out about something where I said, hey, LinkedIn should have a feature where it says, this is my opinion, or this is based on my experience, right? Because there's a huge difference.
Huge difference. And I love what you're saying. Our good friend, Larry Levine, really talks about being authentic,
Yeah.
And it is, because you've got to be authentic. The only difference anybody should ever say if they meet you in person versus seeing you online is, wow, you're a lot taller than you appear in your thumbnail, or a lot shorter. That's it. That's the only difference people should say, right?
Yeah.
And you do have to be authentic. And I thought COVID had kind of busted all those norms, had busted all those. You can't fake it anymore. But doggone it, I see it creeping back in there, where people, again, like you said, they try to be experts in fields they're not. Be careful what you put into your mind, because, man, there's a lot of junk being thrown around out there from people who know nothing about what they're doing. Yeah.
And it's from a lot of people that are chasing the likes and the comments, right, for whatever reason, typically to monetize somehow, some way. Where, and here's how you can tell if somebody's authentic. Here's an easy litmus test, right? Do they post? Is everything that they post positive and good and everything's great all the time, right? Because That's not reality, right? There's ups and downs. And, is somebody who shares the good, the bad, and everything in between, that's typically a more authentic person, right? Like you said, a couple times, like, hey, I do a lot, I have balance. Yeah, I do, but I also fall short a lot. I don't do it perfectly. After a tough quarter, right, which we all know right now is a tough sales environment. Was I showing up as my best self for my 4 kids, every day? No. Was I, balancing perfect, all the time? No. It's hard to shut that work brain off when you go home to your family. It's really hard. It takes discipline, structure, routine, and things that I have to do to be able to do that. And I don't do it perfectly all the time. Right. So if somebody's saying that everything is great and they do everything perfectly, and this is the only way, or this is the number one way, or this is the best way, where you hear a lot of that from those types of people. How many best ways to, do whatever thing that they're saying is there, right? They typically have, 9 million ways of the best way to do one specific thing.
Well, and what is the best way to one person is not necessarily the best way to somebody else. Because again, I'll share stuff and I'll say, hey, this may not work for you because everybody's market, everybody's customer
Yes.
base, everybody's product mix, everything is different. So you have to take what you hear and synthesize it and process it to make
Yes.
it fit for you. And
Yes.
again, that's where I just detest when there's this post. You're right. Hey, here's the number one hack. This is it. This made a
Yeah.
total difference in my business.
Yeah.
Well, may have made a difference in your business, but it won't necessarily work in somebody else's business. Hello. Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. You got to sift through that stuff. You got to test things. You got to have your own experience. There was a while where people were saying, never send a video on the first touch. And I was like, that just sounds ridiculous. So I ran an experiment where it was like, for 4 weeks, we didn't send a video on the first touch with a bunch of prospects. And then for 4 weeks, we sent a video as the first touch with the prospects. And this was like for LinkedIn. And the acceptance rate was lower on one, but we booked way more meetings when video was the first thing that they saw, even though all the gurus online were saying never to do that.
Right. Because again, I think you allow your authentic self to come through. Hey, I got a question I want to ask you, but I want to remind the audience, May 24th, Sales Logic Live. You probably know I do another podcast with Meredith Elliott Powell. We're coming out with the Sales Logic system. We have simplified the entire sales process down to 3 steps. We're rolling it out May 24th. We're going to put the link in the show notes. We want you to join us live, either in Dallas or online. And I'll tell you what, it's a game changer because a lot of stuff we've been talking about here with Collin, is baked into that material. So the question I want to ask you, I missed my quota in the first quarter. Mm-hmm. I'm struggling already as we get into the second quarter. It's going to be rough. What recommendation would you give to those salespeople who are in that mode? Because I'll tell you what, there's probably 40% of the sales community that's in that mode right now.
Yeah. And you know what? It might not be the answer that people are expecting based on today's topic, right? Because we're talking about building your brand. We're talking about building your network, getting active on social. If you're in that boat that Mark just described, which a lot of people are, then a lot of this stuff that we're talking about is not a top priority. It's not. Do your job well first. Then you can integrate some of these things that we talked about today.
I set that question up very purposely because you are spot on. I do like you more and more because again, you got to make sure you take care of the basics, and that's making the calls, that's getting the messages out, that's making it happen from a prospecting outbound standpoint. Everything we've been talking about social media, that's, I don't want to say after the fact, but you got to get the basics in place first. Hey, we've been talking with, great friend, Collin Mitchell. Tell people, how can they, where's your podcast at? What's the name of your podcast? How can people get in touch with you, et cetera, et cetera?
Yeah, very simple. LinkedIn's the best place to find me. I try to post pretty much almost daily there. And then the podcast, whatever podcast app you're listening to the Sales Hunter podcast on, number one, make sure you drop a review. It's one of the best ways that you can thank Mark for putting this together and having awesome content all of the time for you listeners. And then after you do that, you can search out Sales Transformation, and we drop daily content there, 10 minutes or less, to help transform the way that you sell.
You make it happen. And you're also running sales over at humantic.ai, right?
Yeah. Yeah. So if anybody wants to check out how to personalize to the personality of their prospects and know how to know the personality of their prospects before they ever meet them, they can go to humantic.ai and download a free trial.
That is awesome. Hey, today we've been talking with Collin Mitchell. We've been talking about how to build your brand. And you heard that disclaimer in that last 2-minute piece there in that final question. Hey, what is the Sales Center podcast all about? It's about giving you insights you can run with. Every week, 2 episodes, one a short one from me with just a solid piece of information around one topic. And the second episode, a longer interview like this. The Sales Center podcast delivers you insights that you can use to grow your business right now. And hey, leave us a review on your favorite podcast app and tell others about it. And while you're at it, check the link and join us May 24th for Sales Logic System, the debut of the 3-part system that I firmly believe, as we've been testing this for the last several years, is going to revolutionize selling. Collin, thank you for being with us. And hey, I'm going to have you back on, okay?
Thanks.
Great.